You're listening to the Nabs Now podcast.
Welcome to the Nabs Now podcast. In this episode, we're taking a journey beyond borders, leaping into the vast world of studying abroad as a blind student. If you've been a listener of Nabs Now for quite a while, you may remember that episode 3 of our very first inaugural season was exactly about studying abroad as a blind student.
And today we're going to be talking about everything studying abroad as a blind student.
Hi, I'm Jonna Wright. I've studied abroad. I did a summer in Sweden this past summer. I've also done a service and study abroad trip in South Africa.
So the Nabs Now team thought it was time for an update, as our insightful speakers have returned home with tales that redefine your possibility of studying abroad, gaining broader cultural awareness and understanding as they navigated their academic pursuits.
Joining me on this show is my co-host Hunter, and then he's going to introduce our speakers for today. Hunter, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Seyoon. Super excited to be here. I want to allow our guests to introduce themselves. We have Manahil, Jafri, and Lizzy Cappelli. So if you could tell us where you studied abroad and how long you studied abroad there. Manahil, do you want to take the floor?
So yeah, thanks, Hunter. So hi, everyone. My name is Manahil Jafri. I am a senior at Cornell University, majoring in policy analysis and management, and I am a board member of NABS. I studied abroad in Copenhagen, Denmark last summer.
Awesome. That sounds really super exciting. Can't wait to get into talking about that more. Lizzy?
Hello everyone, my name is Lizzy Cappelli. I'm also a senior at Assumption University in Worcester, Massachusetts, and I had the opportunity to study abroad in Salamanca, Spain for a month this past summer.
All right, thanks for your introductions, guys. So let's start from the very beginning. This is even before you even decided to leave the United States. What does studying abroad entail? What kind of commitment as far as research, committing to go? Do you guys want to walk us through your experiences? I know both of you have been to different destinations, some similarities and differences.
So my study abroad was actually interesting. I was debating if I wanted to do a traditional 3-4 month semester long study abroad or do a shorter form version of study abroad. And I was trying to figure out which feasibly fit into my schedule. And I was actually taking a class, Populations and Public Policy. And through that class, there was a component where we could study, utilize what we learned in this class of demography and population and economics into a foreign country. And the destination that year was Denmark. So I thought that was a great way of getting that study abroad experience. We were there for 3.5 weeks. So, almost a month without trying to squeeze in a whole semester in my very packed schedule. So once I identified that I wanted to do this program, I did do a lot of research actually on Denmark. Something that I was interested in looking into was accessibility of Denmark. I was going to be there for a month, so not a crazy long amount of time, but I wanted to know what to expect to weigh my decision to see if I thought this would be a good thing for me. So I did a lot of research on accessibility in Denmark, culture of disability in Denmark, and how these things are viewed throughout the country. And a lot of people say Denmark is a very great place for accessibility, and it was a very reassuring experience through the research, through talking to my professor and figuring out what the class entailed, what things we could pre-plan ahead of time to try to ensure the best experience as possible. So I'll be honest, my professor, when I first told her I wanted to go on this program, she was very nervous, didn't think it was the best idea, really had to put my self-advocacy cap on and advocate for my rights to go on into this program, but I'm so glad I did it. It was my favorite experience in my college life thus far. And through our conversations and through making sure I had all of the appropriate materials for my classes ahead of time and doing research ahead of time on a little bit of how Denmark was as a country, I had a little bit of a layout so I could be a little bit prepared right before I went into the summer.
That's so interesting to hear. My experience was a little different, but I also a ton of research. I think that's super important to get an idea of the country you're going into and also just different types of programs. For me, I saw my sister study abroad. She's 4 years ahead of me when she was an undergrad, and I thought it looked like a really exciting experience. She learned so much and honestly was a really completely a more confident person when she returned home, and I was like, I want to do that. So for many years I have wanted to study abroad, and entering like my junior year of college, I sort of began looking into that more and more and what programs were out there. Initially, I was set on doing a semester-long program, and then as the deadlines got closer, I was like, no, that's too long. I can't do it. But through a lot of research, I was able to find the program like that was exactly what I was looking for, and it was a short-term month program. I worked with a local university in my home state, so not my current school. There was a group of 10 students who flew together. We stayed together in a residencia. We walked to class together. And I just felt that for me, having the knowledge that I had support, being in a completely new country, speaking a different language, was really important to have. In terms of preparing for study abroad, I think, as has been mentioned, research into the accessibility in the city. I looked at like the tourism site, and they had a lot of information about accessibility. Seeing if you know like other people who went there, whether like to the city specifically or to the country in general. And for me, I'm a double major in human services and Spanish, so having the background of the language studying abroad in Spain was really beneficial just to give me some peace of mind that I could communicate when needed, and also just another reason for me to really want to study abroad to improve those skills.
That is just absolutely amazing. I love both of your guys' answers. They're really, really insightful. I think one thing that I'm curious as a student who is currently exploring study abroad options is there's, as you both were there, roughly a month or so. What kind of memorable experiences did you have? Obviously, you're there for classes and you're there for academia, but study abroad gives us experiences that we don't normally find in the United States. So, what are some experiences or an experience that you especially felt in your host nation that you definitely wouldn't have felt in the United States?
That is such a good question because there's so many memories that come to mind. I think for me, particularly being a visually impaired student, where I lived, I was in a dorm on a main street with stores and like a minute from the main plaza. And although me and the other students on my trip, we would walk to class together just because like we were all heading there and coming home at the same time. Beyond that, I could go out and just explore the city by myself. And I felt really safe. That was amazing. On the weekends, I would just go wander the streets and see where they ended up. And I would never do that at home. That was just so eye-opening and like such a confidence builder for me. And closer to the end of the trip, we took a week-long group trip down to the southern part of Spain, to Sevilla and Granada. And one day in Granada, I was like, let's just go for it. So I just went out and walked around the city, and it's a lot more built up than the city I was living in during the majority of the trip. I was just sort of shocked by myself because if I did that, I would never have done that before. And then by the end of the trip, just having had so much experience to travel and explore by myself, I had built so much confidence. That's probably one of like my favorite things to reflect on, is just how much I grew. And I think beyond the learning of it, just enjoying it. It's such a different culture studying abroad. Friends would hang out on the plaza at night and watch all the lights turn on and listen to the music playing. You really just got to enjoy life and learn so much in your classes that it really gives you a new perspective on other cultures and just different ways of living.
Yes, I agree with everything that was just said. I feel like if you know me at all, you know I mention Denmark every like other sentence that I speak because it was such a transformative experience for me. I think it really opened my mind to the expansiveness of different cultures. I feel like I had a very American oriented mindset before studying abroad. And so I can think of like a million and one examples of experiences that like opened my mind. One big thing, I've never breathed in cleaner air. There were like a good number of people there. I was in like Copenhagen, like the square. And despite that, there were just so many trees, so much green, and there was no litter in sight. And it was just like, that was amazing. I was also right near Tivoli, which is an amusement park that actually Walt Disney went to. And that's what gave him the inspiration to build Disney World. So it was really cool to see that inspiration and also explore all the different museums. Denmark has the Glass Market Architecture Museum, Refn, which is like a very cultural street fair event. Oh my gosh. And Distortion, which is a huge national like Denmark music festival. It was really cool to experience. But I would say the biggest thing is, again, the cultural differences that you notice just by studying abroad, things that you would never expect to, I guess, like happen in the US, happen when you're studying abroad in a different country. And it's just like you ask yourself this question of this cultural extracentrism. How would I view this in an American context and then view this in a Danish or whatever country you're studying in context, right? So there's a huge biking culture there. So people don't really have cars, but everyone has bikes. So they have very tiny roads, but humongous bike lanes. So that was another big thing that was a little bit interesting to get used to, especially as a blind person who can't really bike independently. At least I haven't figured that one out yet. But I think that was definitely an interesting experience. But I can, again, talk about Denmark for literally hours, but that's what I'd say.
That was kind of my next thing, was to what extent was there like some sort of culture shock? Like, obviously, by jumping into a new city, even, I mean, across different states, but this is a completely different nation. There's going to be linguistical barriers, like slight shift in social norm. I know this might be more probably applicable to Manahil, but Lizzy, you may have some insights around some of these shockwaves you may have felt.
Yeah, I can definitely start off. I think so. The first thing I want to quickly touch on is like language, right? That's one shockwave that I actually thought I would have, but didn't end up experiencing too much, in the sense of the Danish. A lot of them, they speak Danish, but they have really good English. So I thought it would be more of a problem than it ended up being, because if someone would see me struggling with my Danish, they would just instantly switch to English. So that was great. This is, I guess, a positive shock. I was really shocked of how, I guess, accepting of disability culture they were. Like, extremely shocked, actually. There's one thing about reading things online, but another thing to actually witness happening. I feel like a lot of times in the States, especially in a new place, people don't really know you. There's this big sense of really needing to assert yourself to help out this poor blind person if they're on a corner, or just like insistently offer help or assistance, even if someone said no. But I honestly experienced none of that in Denmark when I was there. If I asked them for help, they were very helpful, but never ever once like overstepped. And same with, again, the accessibility of the country. It was just amazing. It was like shocking. There wasn't much braille, actually. Things were all digital. There was a lot of audio cues, but there wasn't really any braille in the country, at least from the places I was in. So that was a little barrier. But the biggest accessibility thing that I would say is, because it's a huge biking culture, there are trains that can get you places, but there's not really buses, and people normally just bike where they need to go. Since I wasn't there for too long, I didn't face this hurdle too much. We did go on a biking tour, and fortunately there was a tandem bike available that I was able to hop on. But that was just like a little bit of a thought I had if I were to live there longer, about ways to maybe get around more efficiently.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with so much of what you said. I think when thinking about accessibility, that was something I was really nervous about. I was greatly concerned about how I was going to navigate a new city and like just interacting with people like I've never met before and like the language barrier and all of that. And I think, as you mentioned, I found that people in Spain were always willing to help me. And if I went out to a restaurant, if I needed to find the restroom or find my table afterward, like if I asked a waiter, they were happy to do so. And they also knew sighted guide. It was just impressive because, like, it was everyone that I ever asked for assistance. They knew what they were doing. And I just was so impressed by that. There was a cafe I'd go to every day during my breaks at school, and the staff was immaculate. They knew who I was, so they'd always like help me carry my tray out because they had outside seating. It was just so great to not be afraid to ask for assistance, because sometimes it's like, if I ask, am I going to get too much assistance, or like, is it going to be more of a hassle than not? So that was really great, as you mentioned. I think also in terms of culture shocks, so one thing I had to get used to was how different the schedule of a day is in Spain. We'd start off our day like here, like around 8, 9 in the morning, but between like 3 and 5, we'd have a siesta. So like all the stores are closed. So it was a great time for naps and homework. And then dinner wouldn't be till like 9 o'clock. And then after that, you would like go out to the plaza at like 10 and hang out. And it was just, it took a couple of days to get used to. It was really nice though, because the sun was out till like 10:30. So you really got to enjoy the whole day. So that was phenomenal. And then jumping back to accessibility, I found that my city was quite accessible. I have enough vision that I was able to really orient myself in the plaza with there's a big clock tower. So that was a huge benefit, just to know where all the different entrances were and what led to where. And then I also found, just visiting places, whether it was a cathedral or a museum, the staff was really helpful in terms of like orientating. Most of the time, I hope it's the same way in Denmark, but I'm not sure, that entrances for someone with a disability and their companion was free, which I thought was really amazing and definitely not something you would find in the States. So I'd say those are some of the culture shocks and accessibility that I found.
Yeah, Denmark is the same way in terms of the free entry. I think a lot of Europe is actually.
Yeah.
And same thing with the, sun being up for so long. It would be up at, till like 10:30, 11 p.m. and then go down and then rise again at like 3 a.m.
Oh my gosh,
And it
I
was
would
like,
love that.
That's so early.
I like barely slept because the sun was out.
It really
That is
starts to interfere
amazing.
with your circadian rhythm.
No, literally.
That is super interesting, you guys. Getting back to more of the studying, I know there's a lot of travel and a lot of tourism that happens on these study abroad trips, but preparing with your work study office or your disability office and kind of that tandem, was there any barriers or any types of anxiety you might have had? I know when studying abroad, especially in different parts of the world, it sounds like you guys both had some very, very accessible countries that you've traveled to. But I kind of want to see if you guys can walk us through, came from when you first initially wanted to study abroad to finding accommodations to ultimately traveling and experiencing the country while you were studying abroad and finding what made you the most successful student.
Those are such great questions. So for me, because I wasn't working with my university, I sort of had to start from scratch in terms of accessibility. But the accessibility office I worked with, they were super great. I was able to just give them the accommodations I've had at Assumption as an outline, and we really just worked from there. I've been out of the country many times, so I sort of knew what I was getting into in terms of going to Europe, and that it would be different, but like also knowing we could figure it out. So that definitely gave me some reassurance that I wasn't jumping into completely new waters per se. And then in regards to like the beginning of the process, once I found my program and I learned what school I'd be working with in Spain, I reached out directly to them to ask if they've ever had a visually impaired student and what that experience was like. So they were able to tell me that they've had visually impaired students and they could easily make enlarged font, which is really the main accommodation that I use. And so that gave me a lot of reassurance, because I talked to a lot of programs and they were like, yeah, we've had like one blind student before. And I was like, that's great, but I don't know if I want to go through all of that just yet. So it was really reassuring to know that like they had an idea of what needed to be done. And then I was able to talk with my disability office that I was working with and just make sure that we had like large text and extended time on exams. And I think those are the main things that I had. So the school that I was with in Spain is definitely older. So our classroom was literally just like desks and a whiteboard. We didn't have a projector or like anything like that. So all the notes were written with whiteboard markers. So that definitely took a little bit of time to figure out. And I honestly just did that once I got there. I talked to the director of the school and I talked to my professor, and we were able to figure out that by me using like my camera on my phone or my monocular, which I use all the time, I could read those notes, and then she would always just send me pictures of them through WhatsApp during class or at the end of class so I could zoom in and have them closer to me. That was also how I accessed, if we ever had textbook pages that were copied, I would just access them on my phone by zooming in or using like the magnifier to look at them that way, which I know if you have the opportunity to get large print for textbook documents, that's great. But sometimes if you're there for a short amount of time, it may not be the easiest thing to like explain and figure out. So that's how I did it. And then in terms of other documents, I was able to ask my school to print me a large print version of our workbook. And I could not be more excited about that. It was nice and bound and had hardcovers, and it was perfect. So I am so appreciative of them for doing that. And then one other thing that really definitely just made me feel really grateful to be at the school was day one, we had a placement exam, and I walked in and they had a large print copy on the table for me. And sometimes my teachers in the States forget. So to have a school I've never been to, just have that ready, just was so comforting to know that like this is going to work out, that if things come up, we'll talk about it, even if it's in Spanish and it takes a lot longer, that we could figure it out. So that was my experience.
Yeah, no, my experience was a little less steps. So I appreciate you, Lizzy, for going through all of that. So I guess the fortunate part of my study abroad experience is that I did everything through my current university. So because the program I was doing was in partnership with the school that I already attend, and it's a program that they do every year, I had the opportunity to continue working with my current student disability office that I would usually work with during the school year, contact the professor that was taking us on the trip, and then also loop in the professors and speakers that were going to teach us while I was over there in Denmark. What happened is when I decided to actually pursue this, which was maybe like 4 or 5 months in advance, my professor gave my disability office, they compiled their syllabus of everything that was going to be covered, and they sent it over, and they converted all of the readings that we had to do in an accessible format and uploaded them to a box folder that I was able to access abroad. Thank gosh for the digital age, because that was very seamless. I did have a similar experience where some of the professors were writing things on a whiteboard because of an older classroom setting. And from there, my professor or other students in the class were able to just send me over the notes that were typed up on the board, which was very simple. So I could, just access them digitally and kind of go from there. And in terms of, I guess, accommodations for school and on the academic side, that was essentially my process and the two main hurdles I had to overcome.
I love it. And thanks for being so authentic, because these are very livelihood experiences that blind students will inevitably face.
All right. So now that we're kind of coming to the end of the episode, I want to see if you guys have any advice for our aspiring blind students and their endeavors. So if there's anything you've taken away from the process from working with your study abroad office or with your host university, or anything that you have that from your study abroad experience that you'd like to pass along to any future study abroaders, what would you tell them?
If you only had 60 seconds.
60 seconds. Oh my gosh, the pressure. Okay, I guess I can go first. When's my timer going off? Is it
All right, the
starting?
clock is ticking. Starting now.
Okay. Bring extra canes. My cane broke 2 days before I was leaving and I didn't have an extra one, so I had to tape it together. So please bring extra canes. Also communicate with your professors beforehand. Communication and just advocate for yourself. And people did not think I could slash wanted to slash would be successful studying abroad, and I was able to do it and prove them all wrong. So please do it, fight for your right to do it, and you will enjoy every second of it and take all your opportunities that you can.
44.82 seconds.
Yay!
I love this segment a lot. So much energy. I love it. All right, let me reset my clock here. And Lizzy, you're going to have 60 seconds for speed round. In 3, 2.
All right, so my advice is go for it, even if you're afraid. Studying abroad is incredible. You will learn so much. Also, like, the only way to grow is through the uncomfortable, and you will be amazed by everything that you learn and everything that you do. Challenge yourself, take safe risks, and explore. You're gonna be amazed by it, so go for it.
29.2 seconds. Wow, not even 1 minute.
Let's go!
She really beat me there.
Wow, that was good. That was heavy. That was heavy.
Next
heavy?
time,
That was
next
deep.
time.
You guys have brought such insight to what studying abroad looks like. I am super excited. I am currently looking to study abroad, so I will take all of this advice that I've gotten from this episode. I'm sure there's hundreds of blind students who are now excited to go and explore the world. So thank you to Manahil and Lizzy. All of the great advice that you've given us for this episode.
Nabs Now podcast is hosted by me, Seyoon Choi, co-hosted by Hunter Kuester. This episode was produced by James Yesel, Kinshuk, Tella, and Seyoon Choi.
This podcast was brought to you by the National Association of Blind Students, a proud division of the National Federation of the Blind.
Visit us on the web at nabslink.org. And be sure to hit that subscribe button wherever you catch your podcasts for new episodes releasing each month. Thanks for listening.